There we go.
Hi, how
Hi,
good
is
to
it
see
Jana?
you. I'm Jonna. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Jana. Here we are.
Here we are. And I have to say thank you. I've certainly listened to your podcast and read your books and gotten a lot from that. So I appreciate getting to talk about this book with you.
Here we are.
Here we are. I started this podcast because I worked as a chaplain for 15 years and I like science fiction, and sometimes it's easier to talk about science fiction stories than sacred text stories. So that is a really cool picture behind you.
The baby?
Yes,
Yeah, my daughter.
beautiful. Um,
Where and
so
where are you in the world? Where are you
I'm
sitting?
in West Virginia,
Oh,
West by
nice.
God, Virginia. Yeah, I have been a chaplain and a therapist, and I actually I'm from West Virginia, but I moved back to West Virginia during COVID to do some research with doctors, which was very fun. Um,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, so I tend to wander down whatever road looks most interesting in the moment.
Yeah, I know about that. Fantastic. Also called life.
Yes, I I am excited to talk about your book because, well, I was excited anyway when I read it, but I have to admit, between me asking you if we could meet and us actually meeting, I listened to an episode of your podcast where you talked about how the book came to you, and that like changed all the questions that I thought I was going to ask. Because I was going to ask about heme and where that started and where that came from and why heme is like you could have made a story about Barry in Montana, but you made a story about heme in Lumley. So
Right. Right. Isn't it fascinating how it raises questions about the very nature of the mind when the mind can even think about a dream. You're asleep, and the mind, the subconscious, the unconscious, whatever, cooks up a whole story about mud and your third grade teacher and a bicycle. It generates this wild, fantastic tale, and you're trying to get over a wall, and there's a horse. You know what I mean? Like this tremendous, astonishing capacity of the mind to generate these stories. And then you raise us questions about the nature of what we call life. Is this the generation of some sort of mind? To what
what is
degree?
everything?
Like we dream and then we wake up from the dream, but to what degree is this a dream that we're waking up from? Because even when we talk about moments of like we want the truth from somebody, we say, please enlighten me, like wake me up, essentially.
Yeah, but waking up is really unpleasant, or it
Oh, that's
can be.
interesting. I enjoy. Oh, well, for sure it disrupts. If you've got a lot invested in a particular story, then the actual truth, yes, correct, might be fairly unpleasant. But if you have, yeah, you think about meditation essentially is, or every major wisdom tradition is about, as you know, as a chaplain, like learning not to attach to all these stories. I am unworthy. I am trapped. Like think of all the, you know what I mean? All the things that stories that can easily run in our head that simply aren't true.
Well, is it in the book? Is it, I might not say this right, Meyer Dobie?
Oh, mayor, yeah, mayor, which is I just took sir and ma'am and combined them.
Oh, that's okay. I didn't catch that. I like it though. It's like Mayor Dobie said, I think it's their lesson that you're not the story, you're the page. Or I
Right,
think
right,
I'm
right, 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 right. And
like,
I love how he's looking back on it like, God, those were some fairly advanced truths that we were being, you know what I mean? Like he's realizing that these, I just love how he keeps realizing just how great these people were, what they were assuming he could grasp at some level.
and the lessons are like a slow burn. Like they kept going.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, I had to, that was part of the writing of the book. As partway through, I was like, my characters sure give a lot of speeches and there's sure a lot of teachers. That's kind of obvious coming from me. And then I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Just go with it. Don't fight it.
Well, and I mean, again, I know your books have a reach, but there were certain moments in the book where I felt like it was something I've heard you say on the podcast or read you write before about liminal spaces or Zimzum or
Sure,
one of those little
sure.
gems that just kind of fell in the middle of the page.
Yes, and I remember uh the first moment when the character when Nord writes a play, and I was like, I wonder what the play is called. And then my first play that was published last year is called What's a Nucka, and I was like, well, Nord writes a play called What's a Nucka, and I was like, sitting there all alone in the middle of whatever it is, a Wednesday afternoon, going, yeah, Rob, but you wrote a play called What's a Nucka. Yeah, but what if in this book a character writes a play and people could actually go get that play and read it? I was like, it's so obvious and on the nose and like kind of corny, but I'm gonna do it because it makes me laugh. You know what I mean? So much of the process was about just, yeah, but that's how I do it. So there isn't some, yeah, of course it's ridiculous. Uh yeah, but I'm laughing and thoroughly enjoying it. So let's just go with that.
But that's not something I don't know. I might be a generalization, a big generalization, but I don't know that that's something everyone's taught to do, to like follow their joy to the next place. It's more
No,
like if it's
absolutely.
hard, yeah.
And even think especially if you have, especially with education, it, for so many people there's a voice on your shoulder. There's the mentor, there's the cool kids, there's the going all the way back to junior high, there's the popular crowd, or there's the tenured professors, or there's the expert in that field who's like, this is how it's done. And something within you is like, yeah, I mean, the number of writers I know who have an editor on their shoulder, the number of uh, employees who have a boss on their shoulder, the number of people who have a family member on their shoulder who's like, we don't do that in this family, or that's not an acceptable way to, and yet something is arising within the person and asking for expression, and it is how they do it, and this internal conflict between this thing that's asking for them just to follow it, the curiosity, and just see where it goes, and then whatever voice on their shoulder is like, we don't quit our jobs and travel around the world for a year. Yeah, but I think about it all the time, and I've been making plans to do it for 3 years now, and I'm actually just going to do it. Like, that to me is that's the interesting stuff.
I mean, that's sort of the I don't know. I fall in that like elder millennial generation, like just barely a millennial, and I've seen popping up online uh, this sort of reflection on how millennials feel about COVID, and I don't know why they think it's just millennials. I think everybody feels like we had this time skip, and perhaps people are now thinking about time differently or what we do with
Mm-hmm.
the time we're given because of this big collective experience we've had. And I mean, if you get really extra woo on it about timelines and things like that. But I know before, right, historically, we look back, we know people had these big moments of global suffering, but they weren't connected like we were connected,
Right,
like this magical thing where we can sit in different time zones and talk on Zoom on a Wednesday
right.
afternoon. And I don't know how, like, there's something about this story in this moment that feels like, yeah, you can go and be a series five and then realize you don't want to be a series five anymore. Like you can do whatever you want to do.
That is the one of the strange unexpected gifts hiding in a very intense, disruptive, tragic at some level pandemic is reality is so much more malleable than so many people were taught to believe. Like the whole thing, like millions of people, hundreds of millions, billions of people in the course of several hours, couple days, learned terms like social distancing, started wearing, like, changed significant habits like wearing a mask, started following the science of something. Like people we're incredibly adaptive creatures, and if that many things, people started working from home, which changed a whole bunch of things. And of course, there were all sorts of disruptions and things that didn't work like they did, but you can see, I love how you said that, like so many people were like, wait, the world that I was like, this is the fixed world. Nah, you can pay our bills doing lots of things. You can completely restructure where you go, how you go, when you go there, and you're still alive and you're still breathing. So yeah, all of a sudden then once you pull that thread, then I mean, I know people who getting a pandemic stimulus check was better for them financially than working and the commute and gas and car insurance and all the things. So they're like, wait a second, what was this thing? What was this life that I was propping up that I told I have to make so much money? Like, yeah. So we're still seeing the psyche, so it grips so tightly to this is how it works. And then you find out, oh, actually, a lot of that's up for grabs.
Well, and for me, I in grad school and then through work, I did work with the Enneagram, and I am an Enneagram 7, and so I
Oh
have
yeah.
a tendency to like want to gravitate towards what's fun anyway, but I also have this sense of heaven forbid anybody think I'm lazy or like not pulling my weight.
Oh, the terror, right? Getting a free ride. Oh, anything but that.
So you know that looking back in my own family, like I love the genealogy stuff. I think it's very interesting, and it's like hundreds of generations of laborers and farmers, and then like maybe a small section of like professional folks. And then all of a sudden I'm like, I have a podcast. And it's just so vastly different than everything that my family and my
Mm,
family sort of, I guess my culture has
mm-hmm.
known before. This is like a new era of lifing. You know, like there's all these different ways to be a person that are perfectly wonderful and acceptable, but if you've never seen it before, you're like, ooh, you have to
Yeah,
warm up to
you are. If people aren't very tuned into who they are, you become very terrifying because you're like, oh, this whole thing that you have assumed was stable, steady ground. Yeah, yeah, you can go do something else. Yeah,
What's
like
the line in the, is it Dill with his piddle 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 line that like sort of looks like nonsense and becomes more sensical the farther he
it's
goes along.
right. Is like when he first meets Dil Tud, he's like, who is this odd man who gets under my skin who makes no sense, but he has some sort of strange familiarity and he fights it, but he keeps going, but I also really, really care for this person. And he says like this piddle, he always greets me with a piddle, piddle, piddle. And I don't know what it becomes like an energetic placeholder for some sort of something that's opening up inside of him. I don't know what's happening to me, but that feels like a good phrase for it.
It, it, it it's like that like those lessons from his teachers. Like it doesn't it maybe he's not ready to hear it yet, or he's not ready to see Dill for who Dill is yet.
Yeah, right. And why? Yeah, and I started to realize partway through the book why, after all the planets he's been to and all the people he's met and the job he's been doing for his entire adult life, why does this planet and these people
Mhm.
open him up, the randomness of it. And he keeps trying to come, what is it about this place? And that, like, why are you not perfectly following the lineage of your people? Why'd you do a podcast? Why'd you do graduate? Why'd you, like,
Yeah.
why all of a sudden in the string of things does it not repeat? Somebody does somebody sees something new, somebody wants more, somebody goes traveling, somebody gets a job that's nothing like any of the jobs anybody in their family did. Like, why do we have these moments of like, I'm gonna go that way? I think it's just like the great mystery at the heart of the human experience.
And that same mystery, I guess, brought these characters forth in you or to you.
Yes, exactly. And all of a sudden, I'm ordering my whole, like, I'm ordering my day, I'm ordering my week. It's like becomes like a rhythm of life, like like a rule of life. This is what I'm doing now. Why? I'm following something, and it means so much to me, and I don't ways I don't have language. It's all very strange. I remember telling Kristen, who I've been with for 30 years. I remember coming into the house and saying to her, I know, like, I go in the back house in the backyard and do my work, but most of the time I'm writing this book about this planet, and I have no idea if it'll ever get published. I no idea if I'll finish it. I kind of know what it's about, but not really. But it's just the most rewarding thing I've ever created. I can't even explain it. And she's like, yeah, how else would it work? I mean, she just like, yeah, how else would it work? I was like, the other jobs that I do, I'm sort of doing those in the cracks or afterwards or in the morning or like, I'm not actually, this is somehow just said like, follow me. And she's like, yeah. You know what I mean? For her, it was like, how else does it work?
That's
Even
excellent.
you,
Like
like,
it is like a visitor.
isn't it interesting how you saying to your family, I've started a podcast, and like, what? Like you going, yeah, how else would it work? Almost like, not like, I know it's kind of crazy. I'm sort of like, woo, but you just turn it completely around and go,
Yeah,
yeah, how else would it work? We get these ideas, we follow them. How else does the thing work? What are you looking, what are you trying to understand what's happening?
I can't grasp all that.
Right. And no, it's seriously really, really, the book was significant for me, but it's really my whole life. Because I was a teacher for years and years, and my friends are all like, you still are. Okay, I still am. But explaining was was the at the heart of my work. Explaining, like, a books, teaching, sermons, tours, podcasts. So to make something that was the opposite of explaining, like it's a story. So if at any point it's not a good story, it's not what it's being true to itself. It has to be a story. And the very nature of a story is it just tells you the story. It doesn't, it's not trying to explain anything to you.
The stories are teaching too.
Exactly. It's like you surrender whatever you were going to teach in order to follow the story, and then the teaching comes back around. But any story that's too heavy-handed, like, oh God, I know the point of this. It's like, ugh. It has to, like a TV show where right away you're like, oh, this is the message of this TV show. Oh, please. Like, it's like you get caught up in it, and then later you're like, oh, I actually picked something up in that.
I will say I like roller coasters and I like when I'm waiting in line for the roller coaster, I can't see the whole track. Like I don't know exactly where we're going.
Yes.
And that was kind of my sense with this book. Like I didn't know where we were going. And I liked it. It was great.
I didn't know where we were going.
The thing that came to me was that, I'm sure you've heard this, that you shouldn't write a story unless you have to, because the characters can see you. The characters are kind of
Mm,
aware of you. And I wondered if you had that sense of being seen by the characters.
absolutely. Absolutely. Oh yeah. The it's like it's like a sleight of hand, or like a deception to be like, it's about these planets after the Earth, and this whole shadowy anonymous group that runs the universe. And this, it's like the more I go into the details of this completely constructed imaginary future world, the more I'm seeing myself. the the weirder it is, oddly enough, the greater the mirror it is to me.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
How so? What would be like an example of that?
Just noticing Keen has been doing this thing. Like he has those thoughts. He's like, I think I'm the best Series 5 in the universe. He's like been doing this job, like this is what I do. And then, wait, could I just stop doing what I do? Who would I be if I stopped doing what I do? Is my sense of self so wrapped up in what I do that if I stop doing what I do, who would I even be? And that's an incredibly pressing, modern, intimate question. Like, what even, how, as we construct these selves, we try on these sweaters. I'm a this, I'm a that. What if you, I mean, even during COVID, well, what if you weren't? What if you just did something else? Like, people do this all the time. There's like, I'm done doing that. It's a good chapter. Now I'm done. So like, could I just go do something else? Is it that straightforward?
There's there's a lot in that.
Yeah, yeah. And even the ways we grasp and cling to our sense of self, when even what we mean by a self is, yeah, a much more mysterious, like for most people, that whoever they are is happening within their body, but our body is actually happening within us. There's an I here, and the body is happening within this I who is noticing and sensing and perceiving. But the thoughts come and go, the feelings come and go. Who are they coming and going from? So if I said to anybody, point to yourself, they would point to their body. Like, no, you're pointing to your body. Your body is something coming and going from you. So we can't even point to ourselves at some level.
Right, because me at 16 is still me, but I'm not me at 16 anymore. But somehow that's also still in me.
Right. So somehow that 16 happened, and yet it's a memory, and a memory can only be retrieved and be in the present. So we can only access our memory through the present. So how do we have any proof that that event even occurred other than our memory, which only can happen in the present? So you just run into all sorts of issues around the nature of time and the self that just make life completely fascinating. And if you're
And
not laughing, it's almost like if you're not laughing, you're not in on the joke.
yeah, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, there you go.
It reminds me, this being a science fiction podcast, the old TV show Quantum Leap. If you're not a fan, it's sort of like the final episode. There's this notion the whole series, Sam is leaping through time trying to fix things. He's not sure if it's God or the universe that's instigating this for him. And in the last episode, he lands in a bar, and usually no one recognizes him as himself, but the bartender knows it's him. And in and out of the bar comes a number of characters in his life that are themselves but slightly different. And the moral of the story comes to be that it's Sam who has kept himself moving through time all these years. He's the impetus for all this disruption and change and chaos in his life. And that sense
Oh, and
of
he, previous to that, he thinks it's something else.
he thinks it's God or the universe or destiny or fate that keeps moving him forward, but it's him. He's the driver of the bus, so to speak.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love the idea that our life is the curriculum that we cooked up before we came here. So we're here learning how to be us. and everybody's our teacher. The whole thing's a lesson. And before we came here, we set up the curriculum just to make it interesting. So when it's weird or strange, or there's synchronicities, or it's super difficult, we just smile. You could smile. If you smile and say to yourself, either, man, that was a very clever one, or what were you thinking? This is brutal. It's a way to understand what's happening here that I find at times extremely helpful.
A helpful perspective to think about if I wrote as a teacher, if you as a teacher thought about writing the curriculum. That's interesting. I like that.
Yeah, and Kristen and I will often talk about certain people. Certain people either provoke, or they irritate, or they thrill, or they inspire in such a heightened way that, look at this character. Look what, or somebody who just mystifies you with, they anger you or they frustrate in such an intense way. I just instantly like, oh, interesting. I wonder what this lesson is. Clearly this person's my teacher. Anything that like spikes the levels, the stress, the whatever. I'm instantly like, oh, interesting. Look at this teacher. I wonder what this is.
Do you think the curiosity takes some of the sting out of it?
Absolutely, because you've already judo moved it. You're already, and then they're only ever showing you something that's present within you. So I'm the projector, they're the screen. I'm watching them going, oh my God, well, then clean the lens. They've come to reflect back to me something that's present in me. And then I blame them, like as if they're the cause of my suffering. No, clean up the lens. So we all walk around with these projectors projecting onto each other, these screens, going, oh, so-and-so. And it's like, no, so-and-so came to show me this little something to work on in here, right here with me.
Another growth experience.
Right. Or like, why is there war in the world? Well, do you have any war within yourself? Well, let's start there. Yeah, then you won't have that question anymore. There'll be plenty to do. There will be plenty to line up and clean up and sort out than myself.
To just start where your feet are.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you think that those projections, how does grief come into that?
Yeah. In many ways, grief is the reality that the whole thing is always coming and going. Or even you think about, for many people, there's life and then you die and there's death. Like life, this mode, and then whatever's next after life, which would be death. But then we know that, what is it, a million cells die every second in our body. Or you look around at creation and fall, like things die and they're really dead in the winter, but there's also a number of seeds that are in the soil that will then spring up in a season we called spring, coincidentally. So life and death are sitting side by side at like a cellular level. Otherwise we wouldn't have these bodies that we have, or the seasons around us are all like the food that we eat, or everything that keeps us alive is from life and death. So as opposed to life and then death, life and death are sitting side by side. Absolutely they are friends, or dance partners. So you think about a culture where people, even agriculturally, are distant from the earth, or people haven't seen someone die or haven't seen someone be born, then these things have all become very distant and sort of unfamiliar. Yeah, so that's fascinating how all that works. So then grief becomes, yes, something ended. It's passing, so we let it go. And there's this really interesting direct relationship between grief and imagination, because imagination is the opening to all of the possibilities. But if I'm still holding on to what was, I I have to let what was, I have to release it so that I'm open to what is to come.
So there's kind of a bitter grief and a sweet grief.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bitter grief comes from the thought that this shouldn't have happened. But anytime I say should, it shouldn't have happened. Did it? Yes. Okay, so reality is it did. So when I say it shouldn't have, I've picked a war with reality, which I will generally lose. Then we say we're suffering because the person passed. No, you're suffering because you picked a war with reality. It's your thoughts about the person passing. Yes, you have grief and you miss them, but the real pain, the real suffering was completely fabricated by the mind that insists on reality being something other than it is.
It's back to that story we tell ourselves about who we are.
Drop, right, drop the story. You like these clinging or grasping to that story. They wronged me. Well, did they lie? Yes, they lied. Did they betray you? Yes, they did. They shouldn't have. Well, they did. So I can fight that all I want. It's what happened. Well, that's not moral. It's what happened. They did.
I have a friend who um, practices mediumship, and she talks about soul contracts. So similar, I guess, to the curriculum we wrote before we got here, that we sort of shook hands before we came to agree to like fight and tussle it out. And she has this notion of like if you can let it go, you can end that contract. This can be the last time you have to have that particular lesson. If you can see it and learn from it, let it go.
Oh, absolutely. And especially when we notice patterns. And part of the power of the examining all these thoughts is you break these patterns. Like, oh, whenever that comes around, I immediately go to war. So if I just drop that need for things to constantly be how I decided they were going to be.
But the awareness,
Yes.
there's a quote in the book, right, about how big is your awareness? Like your awareness, like can you fit that in your awareness? Because if not, it's like what can you see? And you can't make anyone, and you can rip someone's blinders off, but that is not always helpful.
Yes.
They'll just
Yes. Yeah. So you have to completely give up controlling other people, making other people wake up. Like, it's all about each of us doing our own work, essentially. And the person who's going around trying to fix others, thinking they're making the world a better place, no, you have plenty to do. You have plenty to do yourself. And the people that we're drawn to and inspire us are the people who aren't in our business. They're taking care of their business, and they become so compelling to us.
isn't that fascinating? That ability to
Yeah.
just sit with yourself and your stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And examine it. And then, like, yeah, do your work. Like, oh, I've got a bunch of stuff around so and so. Okay, what is it? Oh, I keep expecting them to be, oh, expecting, interesting word. Let's follow expecting. Oh, expecting is I place a whole thing on them about what they'll do in the future. Oh, so I'm not present. I've already built a thing that they're supposed to do somewhere down the road that even I'm fuzzy on, and then I hold them to it. And then I say that they're making my life difficult. I'm making my life difficult. I keep once again the projector. I keep projecting them onto the screen and saying they keep wronging me. No, I keep wronging me by insisting that they be something other than they're not. They've proven who they are. Okay. Yeah. The whole thing just becomes so much more interesting. And you don't have to live with all this endless suffering and torment. You can clean it up essentially inside of you.
And that's the work of being a person, but it's also, I mean, it can be deeply enjoyable. Like I think that spiritual work, and maybe this is just coming through the tradition I came through, sometimes it can be made to look like, oh, almost like self-flagellation, like make sure you're the good enough person, but it's
Ugh,
really being a whole broad person who has all these different experiences.
yes. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and the person who's trying to be good's already in trouble. Like, you're fine. Stop attaching to the idea that, yeah, yeah, yeah. There's way more flow to it.
What has that flow been like for you? Like in sort of these different, writing these different stories or being a teacher to, how would you see yourself now? What's that flow like for you now?
I just don't, uh, I just follow wherever it's going. So I'm talking to you. How delightful. And then I'm writing my next play, so I'll write for a bit. Then I'll go get in the ocean. I'll go surfing. I'll stop by the grocery store. Then I'll have an appointment after that. Then I'll keep writing for a while. Then I'll pick up my daughter from school. That's what I'll do.
It's a good day. It's a good day.
Yeah, it's actually quite like I'm not busy. I'm not trying to cram a bunch of things in. There's always plenty of time. So, uh, a generative, generous universe rather than a place of scarcity. And whenever somebody provokes or I notice something sort of spiking or somebody a heated reaction of any way, I I follow it and examine it. What's that about? Why did they just get me so cranked up? What is that? Yeah, and I'll ask a bunch of questions about it. See where it goes. See what it is. See what it is. I keep thinking it's them. No, it's something. There's something in me that they, yeah, evoke. So what is it? Let's see what it is. See what's in there. Yeah, and you generally find all sorts of interesting things. Yeah, and then you clean it up. Oh yeah, look at that belief or thought or assumption or expectation I was carrying around, putting on them. Oh, that let's just drop that, or let it drop us. Yeah.
I was babysitting a little girl many years ago, and I took her to Taco Bell because that's where she said she wanted to go. But when we got there, she wanted to order spaghetti. I was like, they don't have spaghetti at Taco Bell. She got so frustrated and so angry, and that has come back to me so many times in my own life. And I'm like, it's like I'm walking up to the person at Taco Bell and asking for spaghetti. I'm not in the right spot, or I'm asking for something that doesn't exist.
Oh, that is brilliant. Right. And I'm blaming Taco Bell. What is wrong? Taco Bell wronged me. No. Like I would have that's great. That's so good.
So the flow is good. The book is good. Do you have, I mean, is there a second story for him and Nunya and what's next?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. We'll need to, yeah, you yeah. We have to go back and understand how Nunez's whole yeah, and then then we're gonna go back and find out where Dill Tud comes from. Yeah, yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot of we still have a lot of stories to follow.
I realized once I got to the end of the book that I was kind of sad that the folks that he left behind, or the folks that sort of turned away from him, like that wasn't resolved. I mean,
So
that's
that
very much
right.
like
So
life, but
yeah, so we're gonna have to do that too. Hmm. Oh yeah, there's lots of there are lots of stories here. Yeah, we might be at this for a while.
But I love these characters, and I'm grateful to get to talk about the book and about just the lifey stuff in general with you. This is very cool. I've certainly gleaned a lot from your work myself over the years, and I'm very grateful for that. I think it's a wild thing that the world we live in, you can create something and put it out there and connect with people in all these different ways.
I I am we're talking on like Zoom right now across the country about a thing that I typed and somebody somewhere dropped it on your doorstep. Like, yeah, I'm like, sometimes I'll just say I was born in the 1900s. Just right. It's like if you lose the wonder and awe, that's the whole game right there. So even the fact that we can make these things and share them with each other and talk about them, and geography itself doesn't limit that. Just incredible. Incredible.
And I know when I was in seminary, there was the famous line that got repeated a lot in our classes of, well, why did we stop writing things down? Certainly, gospel just means good news, and there's still more good stories to tell. And this notion of everyone's life is a story, is a good
Yeah,
story to
absolutely.
be told.
Yeah. 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 Hmm. And people who don't even exist, we can tell their stories as too on other planets. And then it turns out it feels real.
Or even, I love the end of Hamilton when Eliza sees the audience. She's hoping that her husband's story will be told, and then gasps at the end because she sees the audience, and it's not spoken, but it's sort of like she sees that it happened, that her goal was accomplished. And it's just the interconnectivity of that is just amazing
Hmm.
to me.
Hmm. 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 Yep. Yep. Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm with you there. I love it. I love that you're doing a podcast about science fiction. I haven't read science fiction. Maybe Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Otherwise, I don't know anything about the genre.
Um, I I just love really any story. Again, it came from chaplaincy, and people could get kind of uptight if they were talking about the stories of their tradition. But if you ask them who their favorite superhero was, oh, they could talk forever, and
Mm,
they would tell.
interesting.
And the stories told us something about their values. And then, of course, if you think about Joseph Campbell and what
Yeah.
those myths really mean,
Yeah.
and how those um, you know, going to things like comic book conventions where there are fandoms, but fandoms are really like their own religious traditions. So
Yes.
it's very cool stuff.
So true. Very cool. It was great talking to you.
It was so good talking with you too. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well. See you down the road.
Peace.
Bye bye.